Have you ever been driving along, hit one of those monster potholes and just thought, "Ugh, who's supposed to fix this?"
Oh, definitely.
Or maybe wondered why your council tax bill seems to keep creeping up, but well, local services don't seem any better.
Hmm.
You're definitely not alone there. What we're seeing across the UK right now is, it's a growing number of local councils basically teetering on the edge. Some have already declared bankruptcy.
It's become a really significant issue.
Yeah, it's critical, and it's quietly impacting daily life for millions, often in ways we don't even quite realize. So, our mission today on the deep dive is to pull back the curtain on this. It's a complex and honestly pretty worrying trend.
It really is.
We want to understand the tangled reasons behind these financial crises, what it really means for, your local community, and crucially, what solutions are actually being talked about, what
Yeah.
can pull these essential bodies back from the brink.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a deep dive into sources that break down the history, the current challenges, and hopefully the way forward.
It truly is a fascinating and sometimes quite alarming journey these councils have been on. What's really critical to grasp first is just how fundamental local government is,
Right.
to the very fabric of our communities. And that's why it's so surprising, maybe even shocking, to see so many facing this level of financial strain now.
Okay, let's unpack this then, just for clarity. What exactly is a council in the UK? What are their core functions?
Well, simply put, a council is your local government authority.
Okay.
Their main job is providing essential services right where you live, basically making sure your local community functions smoothly day to day.
Like the unsung heroes.
Exactly, sort of the unsung heroes whose work you probably take for granted until it stops working.
Yeah.
They handle, everything from waste collection, getting your bins emptied,
Right.
to overseeing local education, providing housing support, maintaining roads.
What, holes again?
The potholes, yes.
Yeah.
And critically, delivering social care for vulnerable adults and children. Plus parks, libraries, public safety stuff too. It's incredibly broad.
Right. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. How did these institutions, which seem so fundamental, get into such dire straits financially? It feels quite recent, but I guess the roots go deeper.
Oh, absolutely. The historical context is crucial here. If you look back, say, before the 2008 financial crisis,
Right.
councils generally received pretty substantial funding from central government. That was then supplemented by local taxes, council tax from residents, business rates from companies.
So a more stable setup.
Generally, yes.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, they managed okay, operated with a fairly predictable income. But the big shift, the real turning point, came after 2008. That's when the government brought in drastic austerity measures.
Oh, austerity.
And that led to massive, really unprecedented cuts in central funding for councils.
How massive are we talking?
Well, figures suggest between 2010 and 2020, councils lost something like 40% to 60% of their central government
But
funding.
that's huge.
It is. It forced them into this really tough position, having to do more, or at least maintain essential services, with significantly less money.
So trying to keep things running on fumes, basically.
Pretty much. And a stark early example, a real warning sign, was Northamptonshire County Council. They went bankrupt back in 2018.
I remember that.
Yeah, and that was after suffering cuts of around, I think, $500 million over several years.
Mm.
It showed what could happen.
So, okay, what does this all mean for us, for the everyday person listening? How do councils actually impact your daily life? Beyond roads and bins, what's the real so what?
Well, the impact is often kind of invisible, isn't it? Until it's not.
Yeah.
It's the hand ensuring things just work.
Yeah.
From your kid's school to clean streets, it's incredibly broad and deeply personal.
Give us some examples.
Okay, so they operate your local schools, education. They provide vital, often life-changing support through social care for the elderly, vulnerable adults, at-risk kids. It's huge.
A massive responsibility.
Absolutely. Then there's affordable homes, managing social housing, waste management, recycling, that's them, maintaining parks, green spaces you use.
Right.
They also try to boost local businesses, regenerate towns, even things like street lighting, supporting libraries, community centers.
You really do take it for granted, don't you?
You do. Until suddenly, maybe your local library hours are cut or the park looks neglected. That's when the impact of these financial struggles really hits home.
So without properly funded councils.
The quality of life in communities just suffers dramatically across the board.
That paints a pretty stark picture, all right. Now, let's dive into the core problem. Why are councils actually going bankrupt? Is it just one thing or more like a perfect storm?
It's definitely a confluence of factors. A perfect storm is a good way to put it, actually. And it's been building for, well, over a decade.
Okay, so what are the main ingredients in this storm?
Firstly, we have to go back to those austerity cuts and reduced government funding. We can't overstate that.
The 40–60% cuts we mentioned?
Exactly. The severe slashing of funds since 2010 has had this devastating cumulative effect. You look at specific places, Manchester City Council lost, what, $380 million? Liverpool saw a massive 63% reduction. Birmingham faced something like $700 million in cumulative cuts over time.
Those numbers are staggering.
They really are.
Yeah.
These aren't just minor tweaks, they're deep structural cuts. Secondly, a huge driver is the rising cost of social care. This has become an immense, almost uncontrollable burden for many councils.
Why has that gone up so much?
Well, largely due to an aging population and just increased demand generally for care for the elderly, vulnerable adults, kids at risk. Costs have just skyrocketed.
And councils have to cover this.
Yes, they bear these huge expenses, often legally obliged to provide the care, but without enough extra support from central government to match the rising need. You mentioned Birmingham earlier.
Right, there's Section 114 notice.
Yeah, in 2023. That was partly due to a massive equal pay claim liability, about £87 million, but critically also because of these escalating social care costs. It tipped them over the edge.
Okay, so cuts, social care, what else?
Then there's high inflation, especially recently.
Ah, yes, hitting everyone.
Exactly. It's pushed up the cost of everything. Councils buy energy, wages, construction materials. Makes delivering services exponentially more expensive, even if their budgets hadn't already been slashed.
It's a double whammy.
Precisely. And then another concerning piece is risky investments and mismanagement.
What was going on there?
Well, some councils, kind of desperate to offset the funding cuts and generate income, invested heavily, sometimes in commercial property, sometimes in other, let's say, speculative ventures.
Hoping for big returns.
Exactly. But when these investments failed, which they often did, the debt just soared.
Any examples?
Third Council is a big one. They invested nearly £1 billion in risky ventures, leading to their financial crisis in 2022.
$1 billion. Wow.
Yeah. And Croydon Council faced bankruptcy twice, 2020 and 2022, partly due to major failures in commercial property investments.
Yeah.
It was a gamble, born of desperation perhaps, but it didn't pay off. Residents ended up footing the bill, essentially.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Anything else adding to the pressure?
Well, finally, we can't forget the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right, of course.
That stretched council resources even thinner. They needed extra spending for public health, emergency responses, financial support for people and businesses, all during a time when budgets were already incredibly tight.
So just layer upon layer of pressure.
Exactly. Austerity, social care costs, inflation, risky investments, the pandemic. It's a lot.
Given all these immense pressures, then, what are the proposed solutions? What do the experts, the commentators we've looked at, say needs to happen to pull councils back from the brink or stop more getting there?
Okay, so the consensus seems to point to several key areas. First, and perhaps most obviously, there's a critical need to restore and reform funding.
More money from central government?
Essentially, yes. Increase funding back to sustainable levels. But crucially, it's also about how the money is given out. The funding formulas need reform. They need to accurately reflect actual local needs, especially for social care, not just a generic one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't account for different demographics or challenges in different areas.
Makes sense. What's next?
Secondly, and this is huge, a nationwide social care funding reform is seen as absolutely essential.
Taking it out of the council's main budget, maybe.
That's one strong argument. It's such a massive systemic issue, hitting local authorities hardest. Without fixing that nationally, councils will likely keep struggling with this unsustainable burden. Maybe separate central funding just for elderly care, for instance, to lift that pressure.
Okay. Funding, social care, what else?
Next, there's a clear call for better financial management within councils themselves.
Tighter controls.
Yeah, stricter internal financial oversight, stronger governance.
Yeah.
But also, equally important, the government needs better oversight mechanisms, too.
To stop those risky investments.
Exactly, to prevent councils getting into trouble with speculative ventures like we saw in Thurrock or Croydon. More checks and balances.
Right. And a final piece.
And finally, promoting transparency and accountability. Councils need to be really open about their spending, their investments, their overall financial health.
So the public can see what's going on.
Yes, allows for greater public scrutiny, builds confidence, and maybe helps catch potential problems before they completely spiral out of control.
That all sounds logical, if maybe ambitious. So what is the UK government actually doing now about all this? How does the current action stack up against that list of what's needed? Are they patching holes or building anew?
Well, right now, the government has taken some steps, but many critics would say they're quite limited and mostly reactive.
Such as?
Things like temporary emergency funding for councils, already in deep trouble. There have been slight increases in social care funding, but often argued to be nowhere near enough given the scale of demand.
So sticking plasters, maybe?
That's how we describe it, yes. They are also reviewing councils' investment practices now, trying to prevent future risky decisions.
But is it enough? Is it sustainable?
That's the big question. The criticism is that these are reactive measures, like you said, patching holes in a leaky boat, not fixing the fundamental structure.
So what should they be doing differently, according to the sources?
Well, the consensus seems to be implementing long-term, sustainable funding frameworks, moving away from these short-term bailouts.
A proper plan.
A proper plan, exactly. And really tackling that massive systemic issue of elderly care funding with a comprehensive national social care reform, that keeps coming up as essential.
And the oversight.
And, yes, significantly tightening controls and oversight to stop those high-risk financial activities before they cause a crisis. The focus really needs to shift from reaction to proactive preventative reform.
Okay, so bottom line time. What does the future actually look like for UK councils? And by extension for our communities? It seems to depend heavily on the decisions made now. What's really at stake for your local area?
Well, if those structural changes aren't made, if the underlying framework isn't properly reformed, the consequences look pretty stark, unfortunately.
More bankruptcies.
Almost inevitably, yes. Or councils being forced to make really severe cuts to essential services just to stay afloat.
What kind of cuts are we talking about?
Things like closing or significantly reducing hours for local libraries, community centers, parks may be falling into disrepair.
Things people really notice.
Absolutely. You'll likely see more potholes. Sorry to bring them up again.
Oh, unavoidable.
Poorly maintained roads, maybe less street lighting, and, more worryingly, reduced support for the elderly, for vulnerable adults, for children.
And council tax.
Likely further rises in council tax, pushing even more of the financial burden onto residents who are, already feeling the pinch.
So that's the grim picture. Is there a hopeful scenario?
There is. There is a hopeful path. Councils could stabilize, potentially even improve services over time.
But only if.
But only if the government really commits to those fundamental reforms we talked about. Reforming the funding structure properly, addressing the social care crisis systemically, strengthening oversight.
It sounds like big changes are needed.
They are. If those structural issues are robustly addressed, then yes, councils could become sustainable again, delivering the vital services we all rely on. But it requires political will and significant change.
So boiling it all down, it really does feel like a perfect storm, doesn't it? A mix of those deep austerity cuts, the rocketing social care costs, some questionable investment decisions born from that pressure, high inflation, plus crises like COVID.
Yeah, it's complex, but the threads are definitely connected. That's a good summary.
And the way out seems clear, if challenging.
Absolutely. The critical path forward really involves the UK government committing to proper, sustainable funding reform, that meaningful social care reform we keep mentioning, tighter oversight, and just transparent financial management across the board.
And without that?
Without those foundational changes, well, the cycle of bankruptcies, reduced services, and probably declining quality of life in many communities.
Okay.
It just looks set to continue or worsen. And that affects every single one of us in very real, tangible ways.
So the future of local councils in the UK and really the quality of life in our communities, it hinges on these critical decisions being made now. As you go about your day, maybe next time you pass library or see the bins collected, consider what local services you rely on most and what their future might actually look like without these fundamental changes. It's definitely something worth mulling over.
Thanks for watching the video.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments below. If there's a specific topic you'd like us to cover next time, do let us know.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. And if you found this one helpful, make sure to share it with others too.
See you in the next video.